So the next unit in our preview of Math 30-1 is Relations and Functions. This is a 14-part unit. It is more than half of the course. So we're doing this preview on day 2 because our third and final unit is the shortest of them, which involves a lot of review of Math 30-2. So we'll be able to breeze through that review a little more quickly, just in case we need to spend more time on the day 2 content when we get there. But this is all based on one general learner outcome. Develop algebraic and graphical reasoning through the study of relations. And topic 1 of 14, it is expected that students will demonstrate an understanding of operations on and compositions of functions. So what does that mean? In a nutshell, we have already worked with things like f of x and g of x, usually plotted separately. Starting in Math 30-1, we're going to deal with things like f of x plus g of x, or f of x times g of x. These are the operations on them. We'll be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide functions just like we could before. We've already been doing that if you think about it. We've already seen how to combine, say, this binomial with this trinomial by multiplication. Well, what if everything in this bracket is f of x and everything in this bracket is g of x? So that piece of the puzzle will fall into place rather nicely. It's the compositions that take a little more time. This is what happens when f is not a function of x, but f is a function of g, which is in turn a function of x. So say f of x is x squared, and g of x is x plus 3. Then there's 2 ways. Actually, with this, there's 4 ways to make compositions of functions. You can have inner functions and outer functions. You can have f of x. You can have g of x. You can have f of g of x. And you can have g of f of x just with 2-step combinations and convolutions of functions. There's nothing saying you have to stop at 2. We could have f of f of f of f of f of f of x. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brackets I have to close. I hope I counted that correctly. But you get the idea. We can keep putting one inside the other. So in this case, f of x means we start by taking our outer function, which is x squared, but instead of squaring x, we're squaring f of x. So now we substitute for f of x. We have x squared squared, or x to the 4th. Now, g of x means we take our g of x, which is x plus 3, but instead of writing the x, we write g of x instead. And then we substitute in and follow all the normal rules of algebra to get to x plus 6. F of g of x would be our f of x, which is x squared, but with a g of x there instead. So this is x plus 3 squared, or x squared plus 6x plus 9. And then finally, g of f of x would be our x plus 3, but instead of x, we have f of x. So that's x squared plus 3. So 4 different pairs and 4 different results. We'll also introduce some new notation for it, where this is f of g of f of x. I say new notation, it's actually the older notation. We were already doing compositions with this notation before Leonhard Euler, that name that you have heard from me so often in class and will hear from me many, many more times just because he did so much. He introduced the function notation after the composition was already in place. So his notation, I think, is much easier to work with, but it is unfortunately not the original, so then the less convenient one has also stuck around through the ages. But here is a very brief overview of the first topic we are going to deal with in this unit of Math 30-1. I say first topic in this unit, not necessarily first of the year, because I'm still toying with some ideas of how I want to teach them, in what order I want to do these topics in next year.